Strap yourself in,
because we're set up, switched on, and ready to go.
You are watching and listening to Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV on YouTube and your favourite podcasts. Leicester Till I Die TV, your first choice for everything Leicester City. Tune in and join in now.
And now, here's your host.
right, Chris?
All right there, chunkies, how the devil are we all? Well, I hope. Welcome along. Yes, I know this really is a show without any ladies football on, but I tell you what, hasn't it been a refreshing change? It's been a great tournament. It's over too soon for me, and it's been brilliant not seeing players throwing themselves to the floor, trying to get a penalty or an offside visit, whatever. It has been refreshing. This is Leicester Till I Die TV. Welcome along. If you are on YouTube and you're watching us, thank you very much. Please remember to do what it says there and subscribe. And if you are listening on your favourite podcast platform, thank you for lending me your ears. And just before we sort of get the guests in tonight, because as you know, it's a question and answer show tonight, just a quick RIP for Terry Neal, the Arsenal manager who passed away today, 1942 to 2022. So thoughts go out to all his friends and family. And I say rest in peace, Terry. This is Leicester Till I Die. And this is where you can find us.
Watch us on YouTube.
Listen on your favourite podcast platform
Or ask your smart speaker
to play the podcast Leicester Till I Die.
Subscribe, like, follow, and join in now.
I have to make those at just the right length so I've got time to click all the right buttons and bring everybody in. Welcome along. You'll know, obviously, the gentleman below me, although he is, I think, on the witness protection scheme because he's got... It's the beard night tonight, isn't it? We're all doing it.
It is. I've grown this overnight just to fit in.
It's only because he's grey and he's got a suntan and it shows his suntan off. That's what it is. But a big welcome, and let me just put him into centre stage here. Oops, he's gone.
Great work, Chris.
It is. Oh, he said his sound has gone. He couldn't hear anything. So, well, what a good start. What a good start. What could possibly go wrong after all that?
Indeed.
I hope you got some questions. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of sort of questions about individual players and comings and goings. But how? I mean, we are. I read somewhere, and obviously, I'll bring this up with Jordan as well. That I think we're the only team in the 7 top European divisions not to have made a signing.
That is the same that I've heard, Chris. But you know me, always like to put a positive spin on it. We haven't sold anyone that we didn't want to get rid of, and therefore, with everyone fit, we have a stronger squad than the one that finished 5th.
Indeed. I mean, it is that same squad, and we have got the squad that what can I say, that finished so well last season. I know a lot of people have come back to me and said, well, we only played Watford and we got a draw with Chelsea. But, Watford and those sort of teams, we were only managing to beat 1-0 in the league.
Yeah.
At the start of the season.
Like I say, if you go back before that, though, when we finished twice, 5th consecutive seasons, that second season where we just missed out on the last day with the defeat to Spurs, you could argue that from there we've added Daka, we've added, Kiernan Dewsbury Hall has come through as well. So without really losing anyone that we didn't want to lose. So, on paper, it's a stronger squad than the one that finished fifth. The issue is everyone else has strengthened, and that's where it falls down a little bit. But again, you know, we get criticised for padding out the squad with people who are not going to improve it. So, you know, you take it either way. Either we wait for the players that we really want when we can get them, or we just get anyone. And I'd rather it be the latter. Although, you know, I've got a couple of questions that'll touch on that as well. But I don't know. Something doesn't seem quite right in terms of what was said earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And or towards the end of the season, and what has come to pass so far. Maybe just the timelines have been stretched out a little bit with they were expecting outgoings and we've not had them yet.
Well, welcome back. Can you hear us, Jordan?
Yes, I can. Yes, I've had to have a quick change of laptops, but it's all working now. So yes, I'm here.
Technology, Jordan, chief correspondent for Leicester City at Leicester Mercury and Leicestershire Live. Welcome along. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no worries at all.
As you can imagine, what a lot of the questions are going to be about. Before we start that, I know, Craig, you had a question which was about the new stadium, and
it sort of crosses over, and you may be able to shed some light on budgets and the like. And it is obviously the new ground, stadium expansion, etc., has not been put on hold, but it's had a more difficult time getting through planning permission than I would imagine anyone would have hoped. And with those delays, there's not been a lot of information about why there's been delays. But with delays always comes extra costs. And I wondered whether those extra costs that they're now having to plan for have had any impact on transfer business, or whether the two budgets of infrastructure and transfers are completely separate.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yes, it's kind of two separate parts of the club, really. I don't think anything to do with the stadium is in any way related to what's going on transfer wise. As for the stadium, I know there's the latest decision date for the stadium plans is Sunday, 31st of July. But so far, the Leicester City Council, have set two decision dates. One was early February, one was late April, and they've obviously missed both of those. Having spoken to people, I not really got the sense that there's any kind of concern from the club that the plans won't go through or anything like that. The council have said that it's kind of par for the course for big projects like this, that it is taking so long. Obviously, it's not just the stadium that they're weighing up, but that's the main. That's the main thing. And there are detailed stadium plans within the application that Leicester put forward, but there are outline plans for all of the other buildings that they want on the site. And as far as the club are concerned, the stadium expansion doesn't go ahead unless they are able to build everything that they want to. So that's the hotel, the arena, the residential block. So that's why they've had to submit it as one, but the stadium expansion obviously would be the first to be built. So that's why the detailed plans have gone in there. So yes, I think it's the scale of the project. I think there's probably still a little bit of a slowness to the process because of COVID and things like that. So I don't think there's anything to worry about. I think just obviously the longer it goes on, that kind of when it might be built. I think the kind of the very earliest expectation was that it would be done by the summer of 2024. Obviously, the longer the plans take to come in, the less likely that is.
Reading between the lines there, Jordan, does that mean, do you think that if they go ahead for the stadium part but not the rest of it, they would look to move?
I don't know if they would look to move. I just think that they just wouldn't go ahead with it. I think they would probably try and tweak the plans and try to think of a way which they could get the sort of the extra buildings through. It is, they want to make us, yes, they want it to be a complex, but I don't think, I've certainly not heard anything about them wanting to move, considering a move. I think more likely is that they would tweak the plans to try and make them work. Because this is the thing, when they put these in front of the council, they weren't coming out of the blue. There was so many discussions in the months leading up to that, and they would have kind of put some feelers out to see if it was viable and things like that. They weren't, wasn't on a whim.
Yeah, so, but it has to be, sorry to just finally on this, but it has to be a concern about more lengthy delays just because of the cost situation that we're all seeing now. Everything costs more, all the power and raw materials and God knows what. I would imagine that you're looking at probably another quarter of the budget that they're going to have to find if they want to stick to the original plans.
Yeah, that will be a concern. I've not really, I suppose the sort of economic crisis we're in at the moment, I suppose I've not really sort of done much investigating on the stadium front since it sort of really got going over the past few months. But I think obviously that would be an issue. I don't think it would stop the club from going through with their plans. Because I think if it was a case that they were kind of cutting it tight in terms of the budget needed to fund everything. Yeah. I'm not sure they would be going ahead with it anyway, because, it is carefully considered. I think there was around the time of the title win, people were starting to ask questions about, can they expand the stadium? Yeah. They've not, they've waited a few more years yet to do that. So the whole thing is carefully considered. And I don't think anything like that will affect them too much.
You've got to love local councils, haven't you? I mean, this is early days, guys. We've been promised a cinema for 5 years, and it's still an empty Argos at the moment. So don't get too excited. I mean, it's going to be lovely, though, isn't it? I mean, if it all gets to go ahead, and I mean, I've got 4 children, 2 of which are both architects, a son and a daughter, both of which are sort of sending me plans, and I don't know if I should be saying this or not, but we've looked at. I think there's ways they can see it and what have you. I think anybody can see them anyway, can't they? And so keep me updated if you hear anything, but you can't rely on kids, can you? A couple of hellos. Spencer, good evening, sir. How are you? TM, welcome back. Hope you are enjoying the ladies' football. Hi guys, but have the girls on with you. I don't know if you can call Craig that. That's not very nice. James, good evening. How are you? Like he says there, hit the likes and subscribe. Oh, TM here says, are you keeping the extra hair, Craig?
Well, I think I'm trying to grow enough that I can transplant it back up top. Yeah,
he is what we call, Jordan, the older woman's totty. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Terry, hi. Chris and Craig, have a good one. Scott, is Leicester City after? To be honest with you, I'm not even going to
go for it, Chris. Come on.
No. I had an agreement yesterday with Ant from Ant's fan channel. We will call him Oddie. That's the thing. I mean, it came out the blue. I mean, there was obviously talk about transfers. We did a thing, didn't we, at the start of the season from the Leicester Mercury, the keep or sell, and I was very much saying I'd let Casper go and move everybody up one, and Craig, you were saying stop, and then within a week of that, he could be going. Is this serious or?
Yes, it is something that could happen. Yes, I don't think it's quite as out of the blue as it might seem. I think there's been, obviously Schmeichel spoke himself earlier in the year that he basically suggested that he wasn't necessarily thinking about finishing his career at Leicester. I think the quote he used was he would maybe try somewhere new. Obviously they got to May, and then Rodgers gave Danny Ward his Premier League debut, and he said he needed to do that for the health of the group. Then it emerged that Leicester had been scouting the kind of goalkeeper market. That emerged in May time. But I suppose it wasn't clear at the time whether they were looking, because the club do plan ahead, whether they were looking at that, for a year down the line, or whether they were looking at it for this summer. But I think, yes, it is a possibility, because I don't think that Leicester would be offering Schmeichel a new contract beyond his current deal, which runs out next summer. It seems like Nice, going by the reports from France, which are coming from good sources, it seems like Nice are willing to offer him more than that. So I think maybe that's probably a consideration of his. Obviously, for Leicester as well, it would be a significant earner off their wage bill, which is obviously a key consideration for them this summer. It's kind of as far as I'm aware, it's the kind of the main reason behind the lack of business so far, because their wage bill, in terms of their revenue, it is that it is very high. I think they've got one of the, maybe Everton are the highest, but certainly Leicester are up there in terms of wage to turnover ratio.
We haven't yet. And I've got to apologise. I'm not going to be putting people. I didn't realise as I put people's comments up, it moves us all up a little bit, and we disappear behind the outline. So I'll just be reading the comments out every now and again. Should we as fans? And I've asked this a few times, that everybody, I think, put a lot of what Brendan Rodgers said back after the Forest game about whether it was a refresh or a rebuild, but everybody kind of latched onto that. But our owners, not in the oil business, they are in the sort of the travel and tourism business, which has been really badly hit. Is that part of the problem, or is it just the fact that we've got a big squad and we've got to think about FFP?
Well, that's certainly part of it, because they can't, with the amount they are spending on wages compared to the amount that they make, they can't really be adding too many more players without knowing that a few are going to be leaving. I don't think it's really anything to do with the owners, because I think a lot of Leicester's transfer business over the past few years has kind of been funded by, has been funded by outgoings and things like that. And, the money that they've made from TV revenue, and obviously over the past couple of years, European payments and things like that. So I don't think it's really anything to do with the ownership or on that front. But obviously I would say Rodgers, he did first mention it just before the Forest game, that he wanted to, but then he sort of said it in more serious terms after the Forest game, that this is what he wanted. Speaking to him in February, he said that he wanted that 5 or 6 signings would constitute kind of the refresh that he wanted. But he's now admitted, I spoke to him in Belgium after the Leuven game, and he basically admitted it's not going to happen as to the extent that he wanted. So yes, it needs to, and he said that, he said it needs to be players need to go first. And I just think that they've had a little bit of difficulty, maybe because of the knock-on effect of COVID all around football. It's only really the very richest clubs that haven't had an impact, that it hasn't been an impact on. There's not been the funds there for other clubs to come in and buy the players that Leicester want to move on. Obviously, the previous years, a big chunk of their transfer business has been funded by selling a key player. But again, it doesn't really seem like that's going to, obviously it didn't happen last summer for the first time.
Yeah.
You could argue if Tielemans goes this summer, that would be a key player going, but the fee, because he's only got a year left on his contract, the fee won't be on Mahrez, Maguire level. So that's been a difficulty as well.
Andrew says here, makes me wonder how much the training ground is costing to run every week. I must admit, I'm sure earlier on, I saw there was a couple of games at the training ground today, which were non-Leicester, which were like under 19 games. So I'm thinking, presumably they're like renting it out or something to get a bit of money in.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that. I think it's this Next Generation Cup that Leicester.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. That Leicester were involved. Leicester's it was a sort of a Leicester under 19 team played yesterday in it. Played a team from India and won 6-3, I think it was in the end. I think they were 6-0 up and then it finished 6-3. So yeah, it's a little tournament that Leicester are hosting at Seagrave. But yes, I imagine it probably does cost a lot to run the training ground. In terms of the pitches and the kind of the looking after those, and obviously they'll have an amount of staff that work across all the buildings and things like that. But I don't think it's a great deal more than they would have been paying when they were at Beaver Drive. So obviously, once you've spent the money to build the thing, I don't think it's I don't think that's too significant. Yeah.
I mean, we had a discussion the other day, didn't we, Craig, about saying earlier about Schmeichel, just to go back to that. And what I've noticed with Brendan is that he had Benkovic with him at Scotland for a couple of seasons. He was a regular player when he wasn't injured, but he obviously just didn't see something in him that he thought would work in the Premier League. And he had with Danny Ward, I think he had him when he was at Liverpool, Gosman was at Leicester. Surely why are we looking to buy someone when we're short of money? When I think, and Craig will disagree with me here, won't you, Craig? But I think he's the ready-made replacement.
Well, I disagreed when the conversation was about do we get rid of Schmeichel, and my thought was there's more value in letting Danny Ward go on the back of his performances for Wales. He had a higher market value, and I didn't necessarily think he was that big an upgrade on the others that are coming through behind to warrant keeping him when you were looking to raise cash. That was my thought process. Out of all the goalkeepers, that's where your money's going to come. Obviously, you will save more from Schmeichel's wages, but the question has to be asked. If we're scouting the goalkeeping market, clearly there must be a question mark over the pipeline of the other keepers that we have at the club.
I think that's a totally a fair point. Yes, I think before I was aware of that they were sort of scouting goalkeepers. I think if I was told that Schmeichel was going to leave this summer, I think I would have expected Ward and Everson to fight it out as number one. And particularly for the past couple of years, Rodgers has always said, I've got two number ones at the club. And that's how he's referred to Ward. I do think Ward has deserved more game time. I think I'd have liked to have seen him play the European games last season. I think he probably, he's been at the club for such a long time now and not really played all that often. I do think he has deserved more opportunities, particularly for how well he has played in the cup competitions when Forest aside. But yeah, I think he has played well. So yeah, but the fact that they are scouting does suggest that there's not as much, not a great deal of confidence in either him or Everson coming in as number one. But it may have just been a case of, seeing what was out there, seeing if there were any deals they could do. I think the links to Brighton's Robert Sanchez were particularly intriguing in that he is, if you sort of look at all the number ones in the Premier League last season, he comes for more crosses than any other goalkeeper. Obviously, that's not something that Schmeichel particularly does. I think Schmeichel was 13th or 14th in the list, so not right at the bottom. But obviously, it's kind of part of his reputation that he doesn't, he is a goalkeeper that tends to stay on his line. And there are benefits to that. You are less likely to make mistakes, I think, if you do that. But I think that was intriguing because, they've obviously got this issue with set pieces. The one thing they didn't really do, to be fair to Rodgers, it probably took him, I would say, too long to notice that it was a problem. But once he recognised it was an issue, he did try different things. He did try man marking. He did try zonal. He did try a mix of the two. He put players on the post. He put players on the halfway line. None of them really helped. The one thing they didn't do was change their goalkeeper to somebody who comes for crosses. So whether that's a consideration, it could be. I think, as I said, I think the fact that they were linked to Robert Sanchez, who that is his big strength, I think is key. But, probably people will remember the goal that Amate scored at Brighton
Yes.
During the COVID game, so empty stadium. Sanchez came for that, missed it. Amate had an empty net to head into.
Yeah.
So there are dangers to it. But if you're a team that concedes a lot from set pieces, having a goalkeeper there who will command at least the 6-yard box probably does relieve a little bit of pressure and does help you on that front.
We love a bit of zonal marking, don't we, Craig? Especially for the way Portugal executed it the other night.
Oh, yeah, I've seen some of it. Yeah, exactly. Portugal, the women's team was shockingly bad. But I mean, out of all the things he tried, my favourite one was just leaving 3 players up the pitch, because it seemed like there was more room for our defenders to actually defend and less likelihood of them being blocked off, which also seemed to be a problem. The more players you put in the box, the more chances you're going to get of being blocked off. That, allied to a keeper that doesn't come out, is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think I think you could argue it the other way, and that if there's less people in the box, there's more room for the attacking players to run on. I think I saw that. I think it was the Rotherham boss, Paul Warne, was asked about that recently, about why he doesn't put any players on the halfway line, and he actually got really annoyed about the question.
Well, I did see that actually. He did, didn't he?
Yeah, and he was saying, well, because we're there, we're not there to score from an opposition corner. We're there to defend it. But I can kind of understand it. I think sometimes it does help. I think particularly because Leicester haven't got a very big team. I think if you put players on the halfway line and it drags taller players out. Because what Leicester don't have a particularly tall team, and you want as few mismatches as possible. Obviously, the Ricardo marking Tammy Abraham in the Roma game, obviously it was a prime example of that. But Rodgers basically said after that, I ran out of tall players. Once Evans and Fofana are marking their centre backs, there aren't really any other players. I remember injured as well.
Yeah, I remember that incident particularly, and I put a couple of freeze frames up after that game as to where Schmeichel was when the ball was kicked, and where Schmeichel was when the ball hit Tammy Abraham's head, and his starting position was exactly where the ball came. Right. And his first instinct was to move backwards to his goal, which left him exposed and leaves the defender exposed. 1 minute you're there marking and with a keeper next to you. Next minute the keeper's gone AWOL. So I think you're right. Going back to the whole thing, I think that commanding presence has gone, from Schmeichel's game. He still talks a good game and he still gives the refs a hard time, but he doesn't command that 6-yard box. And I think it's critical in the modern game to be able to do that.
Just sticking with sort of defence and goalkeepers at the moment. I mean, I hope this isn't true, because I've read this and I put a definite, please tell me this isn't true tweet out. But if Arsenal, will come on to Tielemans later, if they are going to try and get that, they're trying to go and offer us Leno as part of the deal. I mean, please tell me that isn't going to happen.
I mean, as far as I was aware, I thought Leno was moving to Fulham. It's not one I'm particularly aware of. But I think I don't think he's I would say probably from my knowledge of Leno is that he's quite similar to Schmeichel in that he's a decent shot stopper, but not necessarily somebody who is, who is commanding.
I mean, if you can't get into Arsenal's first team squad, then it says something, doesn't it, at the moment? Yeah,
well, to be fair, I was really surprised when they bought Ramsdale and then made Ramsdale number 1 ahead of Leno, because I didn't think Ramsdale was all that good. I don't think I was alone in that. I think there was a few people that thought that, but no, I think that decision has been justified by Ramsdale's performances this season, particularly those against Leicester.
Exactly. Definitely. Facebook user here says, and it's a point we were discussing at the start before you could come back in. He says, do we need to sign new players with no European football? The squad is good enough with no new injuries. Just loan out the Leicester players to reduce the wage bill.
I think it's a fair point. I think if Well, as things stand, they will be able to play their strongest lineup against Brentford in the opening game of the season. It's the first time since January 2021, which was the game they beat Chelsea to go top of the league briefly just before Lampard got sacked. But they played extremely well in that game. From what I can see, that it'll be the first time since then where they have what most people would deem their best 11. All of those players are available. So that they've not had that for such a long time. And when they do have that, they do have a very, very good team. And I think that's where, if you're looking to be optimistic for this for the coming season, I think that's where your optimism will lie. That you're going to get to see Fofana play regularly. You're going to get to see Maddison play with Vardy for the whole season. You're going to get to see Barnes. If you look at, yes, he played a lot last season, but the start of last season, he'd had the 2 knee operations, and it felt like, to me anyway, that he was sort of always playing catch up. He's not got that anymore. You've got Justin's fit. Ricardo's had another, an extra year. Castagne's fit. And obviously, coming into last season, he had his facial surgery that he'd had in the summer, so that took him a little bit of time. Evans has not got his foot problem anymore. So there are lots of positives on that front. I think I kind of agree with Rodgers in that when you have too many years with the same squad, it can become a little bit stale, and you do need something to freshen it up. But also, it is these are very good players, as we've said, and
I think we've said before, didn't we, Craig, that we were almost like a victim of our own success last season, because we'd had 2 such good seasons, and we know that our squad were capable of doing that. And I'm just watching Lookman on Sky Sports at the moment. Because we hit all the injuries, a lot of players are out, etc. And like I say, it didn't end up a bad season, a European semi-final and 8th place. But that is. Go on, Craig. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a broader danger. I would say, and it'd be interesting to get your take on this, Jordan. Is that the fact that we are unable to sign players at the moment? We've always been very good at having the pipeline, so we've had the players in for a good season before being able to let someone go, shall we say. I'd be very surprised if we're in this position next season and we manage to keep Maddison and Fofana, both of them, to be honest. If we could keep one, I think it'd be great. I'd be very surprised if one or the other doesn't go. And the fact that what appears to be the players that we've identified as the pipeline are going to other clubs because we've not been able to bring them in, does that give us a longer term issue if we haven't got European football at the end of this season to keep those players with us?
Yes, I think a prolonged period without European football does that. I think there are probably, I think they've become used to it now. I think they're fully aware that Leicester's best players anyway are fully aware that they are capable of playing in a team that can play in Europe. Obviously, it requires other clubs to be interested in them. I don't think Fofana will have any problems with that. Obviously, there's lots of talk about Chelsea at the minute. I think, yes, come next summer, I think he's probably likely to be one that is targeted. And obviously, Leicester are in a really good position with him, obviously having signed his new contract in March. I do think it will be a different scenario next summer. I think they can probably start to plan ahead a little bit, because there are so many players out of contract next summer that even a lot of them are players that they would rather sell this year, but they know for a fact that they will leave next year. So they know that the wage budget will be freed in that sense, so they can afford to bring players in, and they can start planning for that now. I think in terms of the draw, in terms of attracting players, they sort of signed Daka and Soumare last summer when they only had Europa League football, and both of those players were at clubs that had Champions League football. So I do think the kind of the draw of the English game can help in that sense. But I think in terms of keeping players, I do think it is a little bit more difficult once they've experienced European football and they've got that taste of it. I think they do want it.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of Levi Colville, who's been mentioned quite a lot as who would have been, if he becomes available, a really good prospect to bed in for a season. That would lessen the loss of Fofana and the fact that he may end up going to somewhere like Southampton, who you would normally think we would be a bigger draw than Southampton, and it's that kind of issue that we're having in terms of being able to bring players in that means that we may miss out on 2 or 3 younger prospects that Brendan may have liked.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yes, I do. I think he is definitely one that they do like. And as you say, he really does fit what they, he does feel like a Leicester signing.
Yeah.
And actually speaking to Rodgers, I think he said it around April time, he did say that the Leicester would look at players that were on the fringes of the big 6 teams because obviously he was at Chelsea as a reserve coach and academy coach. He was at Liverpool. He's aware how big these squads are and how many talented players they have and how difficult it is to keep them happy. Obviously the situation with Colwell, it seems like Chelsea are strengthening with plenty of centre backs. Obviously they brought in Koulibaly and they're trying to sign plenty of others as well, and he's not going to get those opportunities that he will feel deserving of after playing so well for Huddersfield last season. But yes, I think, ordinarily Leicester would bring in, Leicester would be planning ahead and they've done that very well. They obviously bringing in Justin a year before Chilwell left, worked out really well. Bringing in Soyuncu a year before Maguire left ended up working out really well. So it does feel a little bit like they've lost a little bit of that. And I've written before that you don't have to make too many mistakes in terms of squad planning. You can, a few too many long contracts here and there, a few too many dud signings, and all of a sudden you end up with a problem like Leicester have got at the minute. It doesn't feel like they've made any grand errors in the transfer market. Just a few little mistakes has got them into this situation where they're struggling a little bit.
I think we seem to be getting better. I mean, it's not long in the distant memory of Slimani, who was a £30 million write-off. But in the other side, as you were saying, fringe players, Muzzy is it at Chelsea? That wasn't a bad buy. But this is a double question for you here, if I can, Jordan. Was Brendan right to come out and say publicly, like, we're going to have to sell before we can buy? Because it obviously almost alerts other clubs to, we've got to sell players, and they're sort of coming in for the likes of Fofana, possibly in Maddison. And B, the other thing is, those players that we've got, have we been too generous with the deals that we've given them? Have we got a lot of players that necessarily aren't good enough for a regular first team slot, but they're on good money and they're quite prepared to sit down and not want to go elsewhere because they'll be on less money?
Yeah, well, with the first question, I think it's difficult because from a journalist point of view, I was glad Rodgers said it because it's a better story when you get honesty from the manager. I think there's I think personally, speaking from a fan's perspective, I think I would probably like him to do it as well because it makes things a little bit clearer. From the transfer business side, yes, maybe not. But then it's only going to lead to. I think he's aware that it's only going to lead to more questions if he doesn't come out and say that. Well, you're still asking, well, why aren't you doing any business then? And also, they are in a position where, they are Leicester's players. They are under contract. They still get to decide how much they sell them for, and if clubs don't come in with a big enough offer, they don't have to sell. So they still have a little bit of strength in their hand. As for the second question, yes, I think that's the case a little bit. They probably do have players on decent money that are on the fringes, but they were trying to build a squad that could consistently challenge the the top clubs, and so when you have injuries, you need decent backups to be able to come in and play well. One of the ways to get good backup players is to pay them well. Not all footballers are happy sitting on a bench and playing 10 or 15 games a season. Most of them want to be playing 40 games a season, but it certainly sweetens the deal a little bit if you're being paid handsomely. Obviously, there's the kind of issue with that the Premier League wages have risen so sharply that say other clubs from overseas want to sign a Leicester fringe player, even if they're at a similar level to Leicester in their own division, they're not going to be offering Premier League wages. That's just the nature of the Premier League. So yes, I think that it probably is a little bit of a difficulty from that point of view.
I want to come on to our Belgian contingent in a second because there's a question in the chat that I want to ask. But I want to first of all touch back on our Denmark contingent. We are, and Craig's smiling. I think he knows what's coming here. I couldn't believe it. I mean, we Vestergaard. We all know it wasn't the best season. He came into a club whose defence was changing every week. We played the formation that would just fit in with the number of fit defenders we've got. We've got different players in different positions, and he got injured himself. But he's not been a success at Leicester. I don't think he will ever be the first choice. And Brentford have come in with a offer, and we don't know how much that is. And Leicester have gone and said no. Well, they either got a player off the wage bill and got at least a few million in for him.
Yeah, well, I think with regard to that, I think there's probably a hope that they will sort of manage to get a little bit more for him than whatever was offered. I don't think he has a future at the club, to be honest. I don't think it's a case that they're rejecting bids because they're thinking, that they want to keep him. I think the moment indeed he started ahead of him at centre-back it made it clear that he was always going to be lower down the pecking order. I don't think it's necessarily Vestergaard's fault. I just don't think... I think it's just a poor signing in that his style of defending does not fit the style of defending. Leicester's style of defending.
But him, I thought Bertrand was going to be a good signing. Neither of them particularly worked out well. But who at Leicester would have negotiated a deal where we're losing our chief transfer negotiator, going off to Atlanta, or whatever the actual official title is. So we go and get one from Southampton. But Southampton say, well, you can't have him until the end of the transfer window, even when they get the replacement in from Manchester City. I mean, they must have seen us coming with that one, didn't they, Southampton?
Yeah, I got the impression that was pre-written in Martin Glover's contract, that if he was to leave, he wouldn't be able to start in a transfer window. He would only be able to start after a transfer window. I think it's probably different for the guy that they got in from Man City because he wasn't a recruitment chief. I think he was a sort of a youth scout of some sort.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. So maybe that's a little bit different in which he's been able to start straight away. I think with Congerton leaving, I think Leicester would have already planned in advance what they wanted to do this window. That would have been set out before he left in March time, I think it was. I think where the issue lies is that if you then have to change your plans, you've then not got somebody there to oversee that. But they do have, Rogers said that they do have people in the scouting team and the recruitment team that were stepping up with their responsibility a little bit. He did say he and John Rudkin would have to take more responsibility for it as well. I think naturally, because when it came down to the real decision making, it was the three of them, so Rogers, Congerton and Rudkin. So naturally they would have to take on more. I don't think that's great. I think we've sort of moved past the idea of managers being totally involved in the transfer process. I think there's so much to consider now in terms of transfers, in terms of the analytics and making sure that you do get the deal right. You do bring in the right player. I think you want the manager on the coaching pitch working there. Yes, they need to say what position they want and what type of player they want. to fit their style of play. Obviously, that's important, but I think then it needs to be down to the recruitment team. And to be fair, I think Rodgers is aware that it's not his strong suit. I think speaking to him not long after he moved over from Liverpool, not long after he moved to Leicester, he said that when he was at Liverpool, he had to get involved in the transfer side of things because it was just after they'd been bought by Fenway Group, their owners. They didn't really know what they were doing in terms of the transfer market, so he had to get involved. And I think he realised then that it's not his strong suit. What he's best at is on the coaching pitch. So yeah, I think it's not an ideal situation to not have a head of recruitment. But I think there would have been a lot of planning go into it ahead of that, and obviously they do still have, plenty of people in the recruitment team.
Yeah. Craig, have you got another question?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that they didn't allow Vestergaard to go to Brentford. Obviously, we don't know what the offer was for it, but I was more surprised in the fact, and I know it's not a widely held opinion, but I think the guy that Brentford have picked up instead of Vestergaard, Ben Mee, would have been a much better proposition for us in fitting the fact that he's a really aggressive centre half, which is something that we lack. And he's very vocal and he's left-sided. For me, he ticked a lot of boxes on a free transfer. But Brentford have got him, and they may well have not gone for him if they'd have got Vestergaard.
Yeah, I think Mee's an interesting one in that Burnley's style of defending is so different to Leicester's. I think he's clearly very good in terms of as you say, he is an aggressive defender in some of the areas where Leicester perhaps needed strengthening. So he's extremely good at, winning 50-50 battles in the air, from crosses into the box. He'll throw his body on the line. He's that kind of committed defender. But I think he's so used to being with Burnley that you kind of have to sit deep. They kind of defend the box. I think that's really the issue that Leicester have, is that you need a player to be capable of rushing out and meeting a player on the halfway line and trying to nip in and win the ball with how Rodgers wants to play. And I just think, and I thought it was the same with Tarkowski as well, who obviously they did make bids for a couple of summers ago. They might be good at it, and they might be able to do that, but it's hard to tell because Burnley never do that. So that's a little bit difficult. And I don't know, with obviously Mee's getting on a little bit now. As you say, free transfer, so it would have been a cheaper deal. And obviously he seems like a top professional from everything that I've seen, interviews I've seen and things like that. He does seem like a really good player to have in a squad. But yeah, I think those kind of considerations Leicester would have. They want somebody who is a front foot defender.
Dan from Turf Moorhouse TV, Burnley fan, he said all of these players, they'd be good for Leicester. He'd be good for Leicester. We're not getting anybody, and is that the fact that we're not? I mean, we've never been sort of shopping at Harrods here, like Manchester City and Liverpool, but we had recently been shopping at Waitrose. But the way things are going on, we're going to be back down to Aldi, aren't we? Because not the fact that we necessarily can't afford it, but it's what's going to be left.
Yeah, I do think that's a concern as well. And I think I did look at, I suppose it wasn't the most scientific of sort of experiments, but I did look at kind of the players that Leicester have signed over the past few years, where they've signed them in sort of June and the first half of July, and then looked at the players that they've signed second half of July, August, so kind of early window, late window. The players they signed in the early window were a lot better. You've got Ricardo, Maddison, Evans, players like that, really successful signings where it felt like there was a lot of planning involved. They've got them early in the window. They've managed to, and they've ended up becoming big successes at the club. The later signings, like Vestergaard, like Benkovic, they've not turned out so well. There's been a few. Soyuncu, I think, was signed on a deadline day 1 year. Obviously, ended up being certainly a very good player for Leicester for a couple of seasons. So yeah, I think I think the further you get into the transfer window, the more difficult it is to get good deals. But you end up with, I think, obviously Fofana arrived in the window where it was like people could still buy into October, and he arrived quite late. Ended up being a brilliant signing, probably the best of the past few years. So it can still be done. But you're right. I think the options do go down, and there's probably been a few players I would have liked to have seen at Leicester that have already moved on.
I know, yes. I'm crossing them off every day. You see the name come up on Sky, so you think, oh no, he's gone there, so that's another one off. Talking about play, we mentioned that before, the Belgian contingent. Might as well do it all in one question. I mean, Dennis Praet, to me, he's impressed me in pre-season, and I would love to keep him, but I think it's probably gone on too far now with him. Or do you think he could stay? And what is happening with Tielemans? He seems to be holding out. I mean, I think this time last year he would have got a lot more offers because he'd obviously just scored the goal in the FA Cup, and he was playing in his more natural position. The offers haven't come in. Arsenal after him, but haven't put an offer in. I mean, I know we can't seem to have both. Do you think Cornet will... Cornet, that's because Dan's been talking Cornet in the chat. Do you think Praet would stay, and should we keep him if he is interested? And will he just sign a contract extension so we can get on with things?
With Praet, I don't think he will stay. No, I think that's... I agree with most Leicester fans. I think he's a terrific player. I think he's one of those players that makes others in the team better, which I think is it's not something you can really assess with sort of statistics and things like that. But he just seems to, he's like a facilitator. Basically, you just get better performances out of everybody else when he's on the pitch. He's a very good all-rounder. I just think he very clearly wants first-team football, and I think he won't get that at Leicester. I think he would be, certainly if Tielemans ends up staying, I think it will be Tielemans and Dewsbury Hall playing as the two number 8s, and it will be Maddison on the right. I don't think Praet would be too pleased with that. I think he wants to be a regular starter, because I think he knows he can be a regular starter in a top division somewhere. His reputation in Italy is very, very good. If you look at Torino's results when he was playing and when he wasn't playing, it's a world of difference. I think they would have, when he played, I think they had kind of top 6 European form. When he didn't play, they had relegation form. So they ended up mid-table because obviously he had a few little injuries while he was there. So I think he's a player that Leicester will be able to move on, I think, because his reputation is so high in Italy. I just can't see... I think there would need to be a rebuilding of bridges with Rodgers as well. I think Praet spoke in an interview not long after he joined Torino where he felt like he'd not had an explanation from Rodgers, which it does feel unlike Rodgers. He is generally pretty good at that and keeping his fringe players, involved and enthusiastic. But obviously there was the end of that season before where Leicester had changed formations and they were playing with Iheanacho and Vardy up front, and they had the number 10 spot behind him. Kind of Perez and Maddison were sharing it. I think Perez started the FA Cup final, for example, but neither were in particularly outstanding form. And I think Praet felt that he deserved more opportunities in that position. I think the only game Praet started there was the West Ham game, which was the one where Maddison and Perez weren't there because they were sort of barred from the team after breaking the COVID rules. And that was the only opportunity he got. I think he felt he deserved more than that. And I think fans would probably agree with him on that front. So no, I can't see him staying. With Tielemans, obviously as the longer it goes on, and obviously Arsenal having bought more players now, I think the fact that they brought Zinchenko is quite significant. I know he's kind of become a left back, but I can see them using him as a midfielder. If they're obviously with Tierney as their left back, and I think they were looking for somebody in midfield who could replace Xhaka in kind of the left centre midfield role, and I think Zinchenko could end up being that person for them. It now seems to be that Arsenal need to move players on before they can put in another bid or put in any bid. So yes, the longer it goes on, I think the less likely he is to move. As for Leicester's stance on it, Rodgers kind of suggested it might be a possibility that he could stay for another year and then leave on a free transfer next summer. But really, when I asked him about Tielemans a couple of weeks ago, he basically kept talking about how professional he is and that he is a brilliant player to have in the squad. And I do think that's important. I think I've seen a lot of people suggest that, he's going to stink the place out because if he doesn't get his move or whatever. He's totally not like that.
No.
I think, people were saying as well towards the end of last season that he wasn't playing very well and it was because he didn't really care. Again, that is not him at all. I think he was just shattered, to be honest. He played so many games.
Well, like Craig said, he's like a midfield general, isn't he, Craig?
Yeah, Chris takes the mick out of me because I class him as a quarterback. I have done. I see Tielemans as the quarterback that makes everyone else tick. But I thought there was also the thing with Tielemans that he felt a weight of responsibility, which weighed a little bit on him, knowing that what was going on behind him wasn't particularly solid, that he seemed a little bit reticent to go forward as he had done in the past. And therefore, he was taking a bit longer on the ball and he was getting caught on it. And I think it was an amalgamation of all these things that saw the dip for me.
Yeah, I would agree with you in terms of the start of last season when Leicester really weren't playing very well. I got the sense that they were struggling in attack because they weren't willing to take risks on the ball because they knew how vulnerable the defence was. I think that was sort of the first 7 or 8 games or so. I think with Tielemans, I think it was just tiredness. I think, even just for Leicester, he's played 25 more games than any other outfield player over the past 2 seasons. That's a big over 2 seasons. That's a huge amount, and then that's not even counting the number of games he's played for Belgium in that time, which is pretty much all of them that Belgium have played. So yes, he is. I think he's looked really good in pre-season. I think he's finally had a little bit of a break. He's had 3 weeks off. I don't think it would be dreadful if he ended up staying and then left next summer on a free transfer.
I don't think he's one of those players. I think we've seen, even last season towards the end. I mean, he was going mad if we even want to throw in.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think we've got another Mahrez on our hands here. Let's just put it that way. No, Anthony's in. Good evening, Anthony. Arsenal fan. 8 million buy. Just a little bit more than that. But I mean, surely at some point, because we don't want to sell him on sort of the last day, on deadline day. Yes, we might have some people in the pipeline. We know what Leicester are like, don't we, with, transfer deadlines and going over them by a few seconds. Isn't there a point when Leicester should turn around to him and say, look, a bit like with Maguire, I suppose, like, here's the contract. There's 2 great, get out clauses in it. A, that if we've offered so much money, or B, a certain type of team come in. But please just sign it so that at least we can get something for you. I mean, we lost 30 million, like I say, on Slimani. We can't afford to lose 40 million on Tielemans, but we've not got that sort of money, have we?
No, I just can't. I just can't see that happening because I think Tielemans has obviously got into this position where he's in a very strong position as a player. I can't see him then sort of negotiating that away. As you say, there are things they could put in a contract, but I think that would still weaken his hand more than it is now, where he's only got a year left in his contract and he will be able to leave for on a free transfer and join any club he wants to next summer, provided they offer him a contract. So I can't see that happening, but I agree that Leicester do need to make probably do need to set themselves a date. I don't think he's the sort of player that can leave without being replaced. The only thing you could do, I suppose, is if you give Maddison Tielemans duties and then bring in a player to play right wing. That's maybe a possibility. But I think at some point Leicester will have to decide, well, we're not getting any bids for him. We either need to really push to sell him and we'll start offering him to teams for like 15 million or whatever, just so we can get some money for him. Or you say, okay, let's keep him. He is such a good player that with him in the team, Leicester's chances of qualifying for the Champions League, say, are much, much higher. Even if they were to get 25 million for him, I don't think there is as good a player that they could get for that money. Which I think that's the problem, really, because I think when they sold Maguire for 80 and when they sold Chilwell for 50, it was quite clear that, okay, they could quite easily bring in a player of at least similar quality for less than that. You know, obviously they brought in Fofana for 32. I think most Leicester fans would probably say Fofana is better than Maguire.
Just a bit.
They brought in Castagna after Chilwell left for half the money. I think he's a terrific player. Castagna, very, very consistent. Obviously, can play on both sides. So, but you can't. If you're getting £25 million for Tielemans, I don't think you can do that. I don't think there are any players in that bracket that you can replace him with.
Craig to put on Brendan's shoes and pick a team, don't I, in the preview shows? But would you say, Craig, that like Jordan's just said then, if we keep him, we might, it could be the difference between getting 8th and 6th. So it could be the difference between no Europe and Europe. Then obviously if we move into Europe, we're going to get more money than obviously not being in it. And then that would, negate some of the loss we're making on him. Would you do that? Would you say stay and the possibility we'll lose you for nothing, but you might just get us into Europe?
I think there's a couple of things. If it was me, and I know the world doesn't work perfectly, I would be going to Arsenal and say, have him as long as we can have Saliba in as a replacement, or not a replacement, but in return, and pair him back up with Fofana. And I think you would be buying an asset that would get you a big transfer fee going forward if you got Saliba in as well. That's probably not going to happen. But for me, I would say your best bet is that Tielemans plays so well next season that he gets us into Europe and he gets big clubs bigger than Arsenal coming for him. For me, that's I would hope that would be Tielemans' thought process. I'm going to show everybody that, because at one point we thought the biggest clubs around Europe were going to be coming in for Tielemans, and it didn't happen for whatever reason. And now it looks like it's just Arsenal, maybe Man U. I don't know if there's any truth in that, but it could be that he just sees his contract out, but he puts himself in a strong position by his performances on the pitch, because the last thing he would want is to have a dip in form, and people would still take him, but his stock would be less.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, I was just going to say, I think there's a possibility as well that, he plays for another year at Leicester. Say Leicester do really well and qualify for Europe. He's out of contract next summer. If no other clubs come in for him, he could. I don't think it's unrealistic that he would, at that point, he would sign a new contract at Leicester, because he is happy where he is. He's living with his wife and his daughters are in school in the county. He is. This is not a player who is upset or unhappy with where he is. It's a player that's, thinking about his career and thinking, well, could I play for somewhere better? I've only got, 10 years max left in my career. Is there anywhere else I can play so I can make sure I'm maximizing what I can get out of my profession? I want to win trophies, things like that. So I don't think it's unrealistic that he could get to the end of next season. None of the big clubs have yet come in for him, and he ends up staying at Leicester because they are a really good club. That they are. Yeah. In terms of European football, I think you would, in terms of attractiveness, particularly if they've got at least Europa League football, I think you would say that they're probably in the top 20 or 30 in Europe. In terms of attractiveness and what they can offer players. So I don't think that's out of the question, but
and we are in the Premier League, and that is a big draw for a lot of players. Some good news there, and Ant probably just fell off his chair when you said who you were going to swap him for there, Craig, because he's suddenly gone quiet in the chat, the Arsenal fan. But he says the good news is apparently that Leno is having a medical at Fulham. They get him in for 8 million. So, phew. And before we come on to sort of who we might want to get rid of, who might be going, any more questions, Craig?
Yeah, I have. Obviously, last year we saw the breakthrough of Dewsbury Hall. Is there anybody who we could see making the breakthrough this year? I'm thinking particularly about Callum Wright, who I'm a little bit surprised about. From what I saw of him at Cheltenham, he looked a really exciting prospect. I'm a little bit surprised that we've only given him a year's deal, because that means that if he stays and makes a breakthrough, he could leave. He goes on loan, has a great year, he can leave. So I'm a little bit confused as to why that's just been only a year's contract. But he looks a prospect to me. Obviously, you've got the likes of Braybrook a little bit further down. But is there anybody that you've seen that you may think could be their breakthrough year?
I don't think so this year, no. I think it was a different situation for Dewsbury Hall. You know, as a player, winning player of the season at a championship club, he's played at that's a very, very good level to play at. I think it was clear that he could make the step up. I've also liked what I've seen of Callum Wright, both at Cheltenham and in pre-season. I think there was a really revealing quote from Chris Davis speaking after the Derby game, where Wright obviously scored the last goal, and he said, we think he can go on and have a really good career. It was kind of said in the sense that won't be a career at Leicester. That's the kind of the way I took it anyway. I think in terms of how it was a 1-year deal, I think that was because it was kind of just, there was an option in the contract for Leicester to just extend his deal. And I think they just took that option because they know he is an asset that they could potentially sell this summer. Because I think he is at least championship level now. I think with the way, I think there would, if they were about to sell him, I think there would be championship interest. Because I don't think it's out of the question that you could step up from League One to the Premier League. James Justin had only played League One level when he joined Leicester, and within 18 months of joining, he was being touted for England. Obviously, just before his knee injury. Obviously, 3 years on, he did get an England outing. So I don't think it's impossible, but I just get the sense that maybe they don't think Wright is quite ready to make the step up. And as you say, kind of the next tier of young players are kind of slightly further behind. I think you need to see. Obviously, Nelson's gone out on loan to Rochdale today, get him first experience of league football, which he's obviously being a centre-back. I think centre-backs probably don't tend to break through until a little bit later. I know that they're looking for a loan for Braybrook, so I think he will go out on loan this season. But I think he will, I think he will come back. And I would say he's probably the most likely to be next, but I think I would probably say that more likely to be next season. Just because I think he obviously needs that loan to improve his physicality a little bit. Obviously, he is a diminutive. Not that he shies away from the kind of physical side of the game, but I think that obviously that is going to be a key consideration. But what I would say is I do think when I've watched him, his game intelligence for a young player is already good enough to be playing regular senior football. He just seems to, because that's the sort of thing that you get with experience, knowing when to pass it, knowing when to keep hold of it, knowing who to play to and things like that. He seems to have that already, which I think is why he's been captain, for Leicester's youth teams and also with England under 18s. But no, unfortunately, I know that people want to see players break through, and I think it's been terrific that they do have so many players in the squad at the minute who are not only from the academy, but they grew up in the county as well. I think certainly when I'm not being a journalist and when I'm just being a fan, that's it's a really big thing for me, knowing that there are local players in the team. I think it sort of almost increases your support for the team. That as I say, my favourite game from last season was the 1-0 win over Liverpool just after Christmas, because the two key players in that game were Kieran Dewsbury Hall from Shepshed and Luke Thomas from Syston, marking, Salah was being called the best player in the world at that point, and there's a lad from Syston who's keeping him quiet. That's that sort of thing that really does sort of increase your support for the team. So yes, I think it's great that they might have players coming through, and obviously Will Alves, terrific talent as well. But yeah, I just think maybe this season a little bit early. I would say next season.
And the expectation will come with spending so much on a training ground to help you develop players that over the years, we will see more and more of our homegrown products, and we won't be having to dip into the market so much.
Yeah, I think that is the plan. I know that they're one of the things they're looking to do with the training ground is make it so hospitable for kind of the parents of these young players that they choose to have their kids at Leicester's academy and not any of the others. I think they are looking to kind of be the main academy, certainly in the East Midlands. Maybe looking, obviously, the training ground being in the north of the county helps with kind of those that in the catchment areas where Derby or Forest might have picked them up previously. And I know that they are thinking about that when then the 6 and 7 year olds are coming in. As that young, they want to say to their parents, this is the best place for them. It's the best place for you to be as well. So that is a key consideration. But as you say, the process that they've got in place at the minute obviously is working. They've managed to produce Chilwell, a £50 million player, England international, Harvey Barnes, England international. So I think there's hopefully if he keeps going the same way he is, Dewsbury Hall will get an England cap at some point as well. So they're clearly doing something right. And I think, they just need to continue with that process.
Andrew did ask if I can, sorry, Greg, he did say, what about George Hurst?
See, Hurst is an interesting one in that I had about a list of about 20 questions I wanted to ask Rodgers when I went out to Belgium to see them. And it was an awkward scenario where I was in a press conference with the Leuven manager as well. And the Leuven press officer told me to stop hogging the mic, basically, and let the local journalist ask Leuven's manager a few questions. So I missed out on lots of the questions I wanted to ask, but one of them would have been on George Hurst and sort of what the plan was for him. Because at the end of last season, Rodgers said that he was a player he wanted to look at. I think the fact that he's got a bit of height and he's got a bit of physicality, I think he felt he might be able to bring something different to the striking positions on that front. But obviously, despite training with the first team at the start of pre-season, obviously we've not seen him in any of the pre-season games. So I would suggest it means he might be heading out, but we're hoping to speak to Rodgers after the Sevilla game at the weekend. So he's one of the many players I sort of plan to ask about and try and get a little bit more information on. Because as you say, I think people were interested in, particularly because Rodgers said, well, this is a lad I want to have a look at.
Yeah.
Just a last quick one on the training ground. And I don't know if there's plans to do this, but surely if they're looking to raise funds, would it not make sense to move the women's team across as well and then sell the land that they've got there that I would imagine would command a pretty penny in a market?
I think that when they were first looking at moving training grounds and they were sort of looking at possible venues to move to, I think there was another golf course out Desford Way, I think, that they were considering. Around that time when they were just simply looking for places, I think the plan was to sell Beaver Drive because I think they're aware, that area of the city, you could sell it to a housing developer and make a fair amount of money for it. But I don't think there's any plans to do that now. I think they quite like that as a selling point for the women's team, that they've got their own dedicated training ground and it's a really good one. So I've not heard anything about that. I think you're probably right. I think they probably would make, they certainly would make some decent money from selling Beaver Drive and the complex they've got there. But yeah, I don't think there are any plans to do that. I think they quite like the fact that they are kind of two separate entities and they are.
I think it's only Brighton, isn't it, in the top flight that have amalgamated the two to date. I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think there's as I said, I think they like that as a selling point for City women, and so I think they'll stick with it for the time being anyway. Whether they might do it in the future, I don't know.
Appreciate your time, Dawn. So I'm going to make this a very general one rather than go through individuals, because I think we could probably still be here at 12 o'clock tonight. But who's going? I mean, like we say, Lookman doesn't appear to be coming back because Atlanta put an offer in allegedly for him. Vestergaard, we've turned an offer down. Is Mendy still sort of unhappy, or is Chowdhury? Would he go if it wasn't for the fact that it was a team that's managed by Steve Bruce? How many? Did I say that out loud? Which of the main players do you think that we're trying to sell to try and sort of cut the squad and the wage bill down?
Well, I think Chowdhury is one because he's only got a year left on his deal, and I think he's also a fringe player as well. So if they can move him on now, they're getting a little bit of money that they wouldn't get if they were next summer, because he'll leave on a free transfer next summer. Obviously, a few other players in that bracket. Ayoze Perez, probably another. He's only got a year left in his contract. I think they would probably feel that they could get some money from Spanish clubs for him. I think Real Betis have been named as a club that quite like him. Then you've got Chola Soyuncu, again, another player, only a year left on his contract. Obviously, kind of fell down the pecking order a little bit last season and didn't quite perform as well as he had in previous years. I think his performance level when he's not next to Evans does seem to drop a little bit. So I think that's been a consideration. I think they thought, is he a player that we want to offer a new contract to? Possibly not. So let's, now with a year left on his contract, probably need to move him on. Mendy and Amate are kind of interesting ones in that they've both got a year left on their contract, but I get the sense that they're players that, certainly with Amate, you get the sense he's happy to be a backup, and also he's trusted to some degree by Rodgers. Mendy, obviously very close to moving last summer when he was left out of the squad. I think they probably would keep him. I think just because he is a midfielder that Rodgers trusts. I think you got that impression towards the end of last season when Ndidi was injured. Samare, I think they would move on if they got a decent offer for.
He's kind of impressed me in pre-season.
Yeah, and I do think I thought I was impressed with him last pre-season as well. But I think and I probably would say, based on players like Soyuncu, whether he had a bit of a tough time in his first season and the second season ended up doing really well, and you kind of think, well, did he just need a year to adjust? I kind of feel like there should be patience with Samare to do the same. But, he was there were things that Rodgers was sort of giving him constructive criticism-wise at the start of the season when he was playing more regularly, that he still needed to give him towards the end. And I think the fact that he didn't adjust to those kind of left him at a point where, we saw towards the end of last season, even though when he was, when they were playing twice a week because they were in the Conference League, Rodgers was rotating his whole team pretty much. Sort of, there was like a weekday team and a weekend team, but Dewsbury Hall and Tielemans kept playing, and I think that's because he didn't trust someone like Samare to come in and even play Premier League games. So I think that he didn't track back urgently enough for Rodgers. He didn't move the ball quickly enough. I think those were the two things. I think he's done that a little bit better in pre-season. There's been a few nice moments. I thought the surge through midfield to set up Barnes' goal at Hull, that's the sort of thing that they wanted from him. And I just don't think they've seen that enough. And I think they thought, well, maybe if his reputation is still really good in France and they could get a decent deal for him, I think they probably would look at that. So, I think he's one as well.
I think Samare was a perfect illustration of a point you made earlier, Jordan, that player identification wasn't necessarily Brendan's strong point. But when he came out and said he thought he could turn him into a box-to-box midfielder, I don't know where that came from, because he's never struck me as somebody who has that engine that can do that for me.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting point. I think Rodgers does like his players to be able to do that. I think the way when he was at Lille, Soumare was a decent carrier of the ball, but so he can get up the pitch with the ball. But being a box-to-box midfielder is about being more than that. And it is about, if you're getting forward, you've got to get back as well. And I thought it was really. There was the game at Spurs towards the end of the season where they lost 3-1 and Soumare made a rare start. I think Dewsbury Hall was ill or injured. And there was a few moments in the first half where Perez, who was playing as a number 10, had tracked back more quickly than Soumare and was making tackles on the edge of his own box. And it's like, well, if a number 10 is overtaking you on the way back and doing your job for you, that's really not a good look. And the little things like that won't,
It just looked like a lack of desire for me.
Yeah, but I don't know if it. I say I don't know him, but I don't think it would be that. I think it's sometimes if you're a little bit, if you're not quite suited to the style of play or whatever, your brain takes an extra half a second or a second to think what you should be doing. And in the Premier League, you don't have that time. You need to, everything needs to be instinctive. And it didn't seem like that way for Soumare.
Yeah. And this, I promise you, is the very last question.
It's all right, no worries.
It's just a yes or a no.
Yeah.
But this is one of the big questions I've been asked to ask. Yes or no? Will Brendan still be in the position at the end of the season?
I'll say
maybe it's not a yes or no.
Well, it's difficult because it obviously depends on what happens. But I would say yes. I don't think there are. Well, certainly aren't any plans for him to move on or anything like that. Obviously, it depends how they would be doing. And I think if they were obviously in a dire situation, as with any manager, he would be removed. But no, I don't. I think he will still be. I think they'll have a decent season, and I think he'll still be manager at the end of it. Hopefully, they'll get into Europe. I think that will be the target, and I personally think they've got a good enough squad, even as it is, to be able to get there.
Indeed, like we say, we do say about last season being bad, but we still managed to finish the 8th in the European semi-final. So it wasn't the worst. We've had worse seasons, haven't we? Let's be honest. Jordan, I really do appreciate you giving up your time and coming on the show. No worries at all.
It's been lovely to talk to you both.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for coming on. Take care of yourself, and hopefully maybe speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks very much, both.
Cheers, Jordan.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Oh, there we go. Craig, yourself, I mean, who would you get rid of just quickly before we end the show?
I think for me, you only get rid of players if you've got somebody lined up to come in after them, and if you've got someone lined up, I'd be saying if we need to take 2 or 3 million less just to move them on and get the people in, then we would do so. Again, it's the same ones for me. Soumare. For me, I'd be moving him on as quickly as I could, as Jordan said, while his stock is still high and there's interest here from France. Same with Perez. I like Perez, but he's not going to get enough game time to sort of show what he can really do on a regular basis. I think he's an intelligent player, and I think there's a value there. The same with Chowdhury. I think if there's value in fringe players who are not going to be pressing for a first team spot, there's a difference between being a fringe player that as soon as they get a chance, they're going to claim the spot and they're going to be hard to shift. I don't see any of those players doing that. So for me, they'd be the ones, along with Vestergaard.
It's really awkward, isn't it? Because we see these players once a week, twice if there's a midweek game. And, we think we know who should be and who shouldn't be playing. And obviously what they do during the week on the training field has a lot to do with whether they are picked or not, But, you look at players like Chowdhury. I mean, he came off after that Liverpool game. I think we've said this before, and Rodgers was blowing smoke out of his bottom. I'm surprised Jordan didn't mention him there. But when he was talking about that game. But then we we never saw him after that. It's just something's obviously gone on.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you have to have a squad, and
Yeah.
and this is the thing. This is where it comes into it. Just briefly, is maybe the one thing that's come out of this close season is a better understanding of our fan base of what it takes to run a football club and how difficult it is to balance the books in terms of the number of people that you can have in a squad, the wage bill, the financial fair play, that it's not just as easy as we'll just keep buying players without selling them. We're not in a position to do that. So it has to be a gradual transition into a regular top 6, top 8 club.
A lot of people tend to have a go at me because they see these posts, and I've been put one out for Lookman earlier, like this is the last straw, and all these. And people, please realise that when I do that, it isn't necessarily what I'm thinking. It is to gauge a reaction from you, because that is what I need.
It's poking the hornet's nest. That's what it is.
Exactly. Because if nobody, reacts to it, then basically what am I doing?
You're Leicester till I die's Adrian Durham. That's what you are.
Well, you look at anybody on TalkSport and they all do that. They all, that is what they are designed. Because if they were to sit there and say Leicester are wonderful on every show, no Leicester fan would be ringing up. As Rennie says there, we need to be sacked Rodgers as soon as possible. I don't think so. It was so much sort of tongue in cheek for me, but it is what a lot of the fans are saying. But for me, even if we had another 8th place, let's say, and a good cup run to maybe semis in the FA Cup or something, then again, this is Leicester. It's not
exactly that is the reality. That's the reality of what our expectation should be. That occasionally, we should be looking to be a regular top half team with an occasional foray into flirting with the European positions, and that's the reality of it. Yes, we all would like us to be regularly going for top 4, top 6, but the reality is when you look at the clubs above us, and as we've shown this summer, we can't compete financially. We can't compete with them.
Indeed, and then of course you've got Newcastle in the mix as well. Exactly. So it is going to be very, very interesting. And Jordan. A lot of people do poo-poo sort of the Mercury and what have you, but he can only report on what he hears and what he knows. Exactly. Andrew says there, 8th place sounds very Martin O'Neill, but how happy were we with 8th and 9th under Martin O'Neill?
Exactly.
We were very happy in the odd cup. We were all right. We did well in the League Cup for 3 seasons, but we've got to accept that. Like you say, we're not a Newcastle, we're not a Man City. I mean, even Man City, look at the players they're getting rid of. And I reckon that's a little bit of FFP in there, as well.
Well, it could well be. They could have finally actually realised that they have to comply.
Yes.
Because you get the feeling that they haven't been for a long time.
Exactly. Mike, thank you very much for that. It says great show. And James, 7th or 8th, I can see Leicester finishing. We'll see what happens. Well, I'm off to do a prediction show for some score predictions on the Championship. So that'll be very much be on Dan's channel in a minute.
I'll tell you what, the way things are going, Chris, if you get yourself fit, you're going to be playing for Burnley.
Yes, indeed. But I mean, I keep saying very last question. It's your fault. You keep prompting me. But if, and it was a question that I think I put to Jordan, or you did. But if we end up with the same squad that we've got now, so we don't lose anybody, but we don't sign anybody. Sumari might be more of the Soyuncu sort of player where he's taken that extra year to get into it. Where Daka's, we've seen him. I mean, he's been on fire in the playing rules. Perez has been putting in some good performances. God, that hurt. That stuck in my throat. Sorry. But he has. And no Europe. So,
exactly. Yeah.
It wouldn't be the end of the world, would it, in real terms?
No, I mean it's a squad that's good enough to be comfortably top half, and I think anybody who thinks that we're going to be challenging, even if we bought a couple of players, you know, that we're going to be challenging that top 4, because they're even the top 6. You know, Spurs have strengthened a lot. Arsenal, as we've seen, have strengthened a lot. We don't know what Man U is going to turn up this season with a new manager.
No,
but that traditional 6, as we hate calling them, the big 6, top 6, whatever, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to break into that, I think. So, but we have a squad capable of being top 8 and maybe having a nibble around those European spots.
I think so as well. And, you know, Man City still haven't won the Champions League.
Yeah.
It took Man City, was it 4 or 5 seasons to even get out the group stages in the Champions League? So it's all, you know, Mike says they've seen a few people putting Leicester near relegation. You know, people have written us off before.
I don't know what that's based on, though. That's based on people not knowing anything about the club, I think, to be honest. Because as you say, it's not about necessarily just about who you bring in. It's who you manage to keep hold of. And we've got 2 players in Fofana and Maddison, for me, who would be fetching 60, 70, 80 million. I'm really excited about Maddison this season. The way he finished last season, he's already looked sharp. I think we're going to see a fantastic Maddison at the start of the season. He will want to be in that England squad for the World Cup. For that, so I think he's going to come out all guns blazing. Hopefully, we've got a fit Vardy. As you say, Daka's been looking sharper and been working on things. Barnes has been looking sharp.
And so is Iheanacho, in fairness. And, you know, Tielemans, you know, Belgian squad, you know, he's got to be thinking about the World Cup. So he's got to start putting in some, you know, performances. It's going to be interesting. 35 days left. That's all we've got, Craig. Wow. It's going to be a long 35 days.
It is indeed.
Tottenham did it once. They didn't make a signing all summer. I do.
And they finished up with a. They finished up with a. No, they didn't finish up with a trophy, did they? No.
Don't be. I think they ended up sacking the manager. Actually,
See, that's the manager. I mean, I've forgotten his name now. The Spurs manager, but it's going to be very, very interesting. The early part of the season, knowing that Pochettino is waiting in the wings for an opportunity.
Yeah, Doug, hiya, welcome along, mate. Last question. This is from Dan, and I've got to get ready because I'm supposed to be on his in 20 minutes. So he's probably coming in chasing me. What you up to, Dad? You know where
I did, Dan. Yeah, I did. I've still got the lace marks across my forehead.
I was going to say it looks a bit flat, to be honest with you. Is that after you edited it?
Did you say flat or fat?
Flat. The ball looks flat, not you. But it's not the World Cup ball, is it?
No.
Nate, thank you so much as always. Appreciate you coming on, and you had some great questions there to ask, and appreciate it. And I will. I don't know when I'm seeing you next, but I will be seeing you next at some point.
Yeah, we need Dan to answer the big question.
We do.
Yes,
I know he has been busy this week, so I've kind of not pushed that. But yeah,
so I'm working on that in the background anyway. But if Dan can come up with the goods, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I'm interested with this specialist topic.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I need from him.
Yeah. No, I've given it you.
No, you've not.
I have. 90s cheesy music.
If you have, I haven't seen it, so I apologise for missing that. Right.
Oh, now. So it's Craig. Where are we here? And you've got me now. I'm checking. I'm checking. Where are we? I'm going back a bit. God, we do talk a lot, don't we? I'm sure I sent. Yeah, because didn't we have a laugh about the fact that it was 90s cheesy music, S Club 7 and Steps and all that?
Well, my reaction in saying that I'm still waiting for it would suggest that we didn't have that conversation.
Well, to be honest with you, you said I'll give you the scores at the end of each round so you can just add those up. I replied to that on the 20th of July at 2:40 p.m. 90s cheesy pop music. And you
I didn't realise that was. I thought that was just one of your random comments.
No. Okay. Well, you replied back 9 minutes later saying obligatory. So
Yeah. I just thought that's what you were going to have as the theme tune for the quiz.
Don't you be blaming that. Don't you?
Yeah.
Be...
Right. Okay.
It's your
Fine.
age, it's your memories, mate. But we'll get it sorted.
Cool. All right, mate.
Yeah, Dan's just saying there, 90 cheesy pop music. What was the topic? Yeah. S Club 7, never had a dream come true. That's what happens if you support Burnley. All the best, mate. Thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
And we will speak soon. Take care and all the best to the family. Bye-bye. Bye. Thanks to Craig that I am coming, Dan. I am honestly coming. My big thanks to Craig for being on tonight and asking some really, really good questions. And thanks to everybody in the chat for asking the questions as well. Really do appreciate it. And I have to thank Jordan, Leicester Mercury. I know a lot of people poo-poo the Leicester Mercury, but let's face it, he's not had a lot to report on, has he, really? And it still is sort of the local paper. Give up, Craig. Cheers. And Chris says here, yes, Defo did heard that, but didn't you? Chris with his investigation details, time, place, weather. I don't get that. What did I say? Anyway, I'm off. And you can smell me from there. Thank you very much to everybody who's been watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe Leicester Till I Die TV and smash the likes buttons as well. And just keep showing Lookman on Sky Sports. It's really annoying me. If you've been listening on your favourite podcast station, thank you very much for doing that and for lending me your ears. So yeah, I was doing because he would not have accepted that he'd read it otherwise. But anyway, Turf Moorhouse TV, get over there in 20 minutes. We're going to be live. I'm being kind to the council house end part of the street and going on to dance. Championship predictions. This is going to be fun. Hey, we'll see you then. Thanks to everybody, like I say, who took part. Thanks to everybody for listening and for watching and for being in the chat. Welcome along to Terry, our new mod as well. Thank you very much for that. Take care, guys. See you in 20.
Thanks for watching Leicester Till I Die. This is Chris saying goodbye and see you next time.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You better like them too or I'll be back.
Cool. I'm out of here. Ooh, that's a wrap.